Hello everyone, and how are you? Welcome to this, our I think Module 4 video response. You guys are probably preparing this weekend for your midterm exam, and that's great. I've advised you in the past to use flashcards. I want to just reiterate that you still have time to do that. I would strongly encourage using flashcards and to prepare for your exam in this instance. Not so much to memorize, but to familiarize yourself with some of the theoretical terms and concepts, because I think this is a class much more about comprehension and thinking than it is about memorization. But a little bit of memorization is also helpful, certainly in terms of familiarity. So, let's talk about the journals for this week. We had some interesting journals. We had just 5, so we're still not getting full participation from everyone in the class, and I want to encourage everyone to really make an effort to be submitting their journals, because it does add up to be a rather large part of your grade at the end of the day. So we have Chuck starting off for this module, and he's talking about obviously the sort of experience he had in the classroom as a high school history professor, and talking about how he has surveyed his students in the past to talk about Islam and their feelings and perceptions of Islam, and he perceives that there's a very strong us versus them dynamic going on in his classroom, which I have to say is I'm kind of interested in. Obviously, I'm not a high school teacher, so I don't know what high school students are perceiving, but it seems to me that that is an interesting phenomena, and perhaps a worrying phenomenon, because as he argues, and I think he's right on this, is that the clash of civilizations thesis is problematic. It doesn't really capture a lot of the nuances. Samuel Huntington tells us there's a clash of civilizations, but in real terms, why? Is a clash of civilizations somehow automatic? When Samuel Huntington defines the concept of the civilization as the highest common denominator that binds, the lowest common denominator that binds a group of people together, and to the exclusion of all others, within which they can comfortably accommodate difference. I think he's leaving an awful lot of things out. First of all, he's generalizing a lot of things under one common apparatus that probably need to be pulled apart. So take, for example, Islam. Islam is a fairly multifarious religion. There's a lot of different sects, groups, ideologies, sub-faiths, interpretations, debates within it, much as there is in any other religion. And Huntington really ignores a lot of this stuff. So to reduce, say, for example, 9/11 to being a clash of civilizations is problematic, and I think Chuck is trying to make this point that, that there's other things going along on there. For example, the tendency. I think this is a safe point. I do agree with Huntington on this, that there is, I agree with Chuck on this, that there is this tendency for us to ignore the fact that, we as a Western civilization have been pretty good at pushing our agenda on a lot of countries in the Middle East, and we do it often. So somebody who captures this a little bit better, as Chuck observes, is Benjamin Barber, who writes that instead of clashes of civilizations, one civilization here, another civilization there, what you have, instead of these two different entities clashing with each other, you have entities overlapping each other, right? Because this is, from Barber's point of view, it's not a question of Islam versus Christianity. What you have instead is globalization as a global phenomena of liberal secular values, which are no longer really necessarily Western in their origin. They're global because they become everybody's globalization. And as people engage more and more in consumerism and engaging in the sort of democratic practices that we associate with, we have to this point associated with Western life. But it's not, the term Western doesn't really mean anything anymore, because it's everywhere, right? Lots of different parts of the world are all living this Western lifestyle, whether it's China, Japan, Australia, America, Canada, Ireland, South America, South Africa. Um, so it's kind of interesting that for Huntington, he's sort of arguing about these ancient civilizational fractures that run deep into the heart of human organization on a planetary basis. And then you have Huntington challenged by Barber when he says that there's this global phenomena going on instead. And against this globalization phenomena of consumerism, there's an equal but opposite global phenomena going on, and it's not strictly Islam. You see, fundamentalism, which is the jihad part of Barber's argument, isn't necessarily for Barber just an Islamic phenomena. It's Christian, it's Hindu, it's Sikh, it's even Buddhist. It's wherever you find religions that are going back to traditional pre-modern values as a reaction to the postmodernism that they perceive, that the relativism of moral values that they see in global consumerism. So that's very interesting to us, and I thought those are just some comments that came to me out of reading Chuck's journal. Now, on to Adam's journal, which I thought was, Adam's been writing some good stuff for us, and but I worry about Adam a little bit because I think sometimes we have this tendency, Adam, to make some generalized statements that seem to me to be what we call truisms. Now, what's a truism? A truism is an assertion which you can say is true, but which cannot be proved true or false. Because there's no way on Earth to ever generate data. It's just, it's one of these statements that we can make where data can never, ever, ever be generated sufficiently to make the point, truly or falsely. And so in your case, Adam, I see this observation that you make towards the end where you say that the thing about Islam is that people in the Islamic world, and I'm quoting, don't believe that these two can be separate. And what are you talking about here? You're talking about religion and politics. I think that's a very problematic claim, Adam. I don't think there's many people in the Muslim world that would agree with you. The majority of people in the Islamic world do believe in the separation of church and state, just as Christians do. Now, if you go back to Ireland 50, 60 years ago, you find a lot of people in Ireland who believe that religious values should not be separate to the state. So this is something that runs deep in Christianity as well. There's a lot of Christians in America today, a lot of evangelical Christians who believe that the state should be commingled with religious faith. So it's certainly not an Islamic thing. There are Muslims who believe that church and state should be one, just as there are Christians who believe so. But to say that Muslims in general don't believe that is a little bit extreme. You sort of get back to that point, I think, in your response to Adam Cooper's journal as well. So I just want to register that point with you. As for Kristen Parish, I think Kristen's journal was excellent this week, probably the best, really, of the lot. Because I think she's asking some nicely complex questions, and I think she's balancing her analysis with summarization, which is good, So when we read her journal, we can see clearly that she's done her homework, that she's done the reading. She's not holding back from discussing the various pages and sections and authors, and she's getting into the nitty-gritty, which is what we like to see, not just giving our own viewpoint or giving our own personal narrative history, but really actually talking about the reading, which is great, Kristen, so I like that. And you, I think, though, make the same mistake as Adam in some ways when you suggest that September 11th was, at the end of the day, an example of a clash of civilizations. I think that's a truism, because I really have no way of proving whether that's true or false. Was it a clash of civilizations? How would I know? What I can suggest as one way of thinking about that, criticizing that idea, would be, to me, well, if it was a clash of civilizations, wouldn't we have an obvious evidence today that there were civilizations at war with each other? And I don't see evidence of a war between Islam and Christianity. I just don't see it. The vast majority of the Christian and Muslim world are getting along just fine right now. There's only a very small subsection that are engaged in a conflict. And, even George Bush Jr. himself, when he was president, specifically said that he didn't think there was a clash of civilizations. So that's interesting. Now Tariq Ali in our readings, an interesting scholar, says that perhaps a better idea to say, and I think he's generating some sort of argument here, in a manner similar to Benjamin Barber, as we were discussing earlier. That, Tariq Ali's point is that in fact there might be something much more like a clash of fundamentalisms. That is, fundamentalist views. In Tariq Ali's case, what he's observing is that the fundamentally neoconservative values of the Bush administration, in their view that the world must be organized a certain way, clashes equally with the force of a similarly forceful argument from the Al-Qaeda side, which is that the world must be organized a certain way. And you see that traced back very nicely in the Power of Nightmares video, which we posted. Now, actually, speaking of that, some of you said you couldn't access it, and some of you obviously were able to access it just fine. So in future, it's very, very helpful for me if you guys can't access something, or if a link's not working for you, it's very helpful for me if you let me know, so that in time I can post another link. It's no use saying, oh, I tried for several days to click on the link and it wouldn't work. Well, if it doesn't work for you one day, it's not going to work for you another day. So the thing is to let me know, and then I can get that taken care of for you. Hopefully you have been able to access it by now. It's very important. There's a question or two from it on the exam. So have a Google search for Power of Nightmares video part 1, and you can find it in a number of different sources online. It's quite it's available on a widespread basis. So anyway, so I think just finishing Kristen's journal, good discussions there. Good discussion of Huntington. She gets the points there. Now, Alison, I think perhaps in case you're not following the video responses, I think I said to you last time that the journal needs a bit more evidence of engagement, and I'm going to say the same thing here too, because I think beyond that even you're making some rather extreme claims. For example, you assert at the start of your journal, religion is the starting point for all conflict in the world. Well, I think part of the purpose of this week's reading is to say that perhaps that's actually not true at all. Religion certainly is a starting point, but it's not the only starting point, and certainly not the starting point for all conflict. I think there are other forces at work. There are forces of culture. There are forces of material interest. So, for example, people who are hungry or people who are experiencing drought or famine may be inclined to migrate, and we see this in Darfur, for example. That there's a lot of clashing going on there. That's nothing to do with religious civilizational disputes. I think it's much more to do with desperation of material interest. And so I think material hunger, deprivation, also envy, also the logic of national security can create conflicts. If we, as we've called it in the first week of our lectures, the idea of the statesman's perspective on things can clearly be a driver of conflict. So we have lots of different drivers of conflict in the world that are nothing to do with religion. If our statesmen believe that the solution to the national security dilemma is to strike first against the enemy in a sort of preemptive fashion, that's obviously going to be a driver of conflict. And then we get back to Adam Cooper, who agrees with Huntington that the battle of the future is the clash of civilizations. The war of the future will be determined by clashing civilizations, says Adam Cooper. Well, I again, I think the thing is to come back to Benjamin Barber and think about what that means. Because Barber disagrees with Huntington. He says it's not a clash of civilizations in the sense of one civilization here and the other civilization there, and they're clashing. Rather, it's these overlapping tendencies. The world of globalization and consumerism is overlapping on top of the world of reaction and evangelism and fundamentalism. And there's a lot of similarities among the different fundamentalist groups, no matter what religion they are, and I think that's an interesting point. So obviously I don't necessarily know myself which one I agree with more, but I would suggest that Huntington's prediction is just that. It's just a prediction. And I think in this age of a financial crisis, as you know, like from 2008 onwards, right at the end of the Bush administration, the war on terror really ceased to be a major agenda of the American people. It's still part of the agenda, but I think from 2008 onwards, with the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the banking system on Wall Street, people changed their interest, their focus completely, and it seems to me that it's more fashionable today to talk about economics and economic conflict and economic struggle than it is to talk about the terrorism and things like this anymore. So just something to think about. What is this clash of civilizations in a world where the banking system is collapsing? You know, you start to maybe see that things like Benjamin Barber's argument maybe have a lot more merit to them than we would think during the height of the war on terror. So it just goes to show you what events in the world can do to shape our theoretical viewpoints. We tend to pick up theories we need from time to time. Right, and that's probably a good thing. But what's interesting is that these theorists come along and tell us that, you know, their vision of the world is the vision of the world, and everything else has to be fit into that vision. Well, I mean, Huntington's thesis was true for about 8 years, and now it's not true anymore. You know, I find that kind of thing very interesting indeed. So anyway, Adam, I think otherwise a good and detailed journal there, and I think Kristen pointed that out, and I would share her view. Okay, that's it for today, folks. That's this module over, and I'll get back to you over the weekend with some response on Module 5, and then you guys are set for your midterm exam next week. Okay, take care. Bye-bye. Oh, don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any questions. Bye-bye.